नमस्कार दोस्तों, स्वागत है आप सबका हमारे नए चैनल वेब बायोलॉजी वर्कशॉप में। इस चैप्टर में हम बात करेंगे, इस वीडियो में हम बात करेंगे एक नए चैप्टर बायोडाइवर्सिटी के बारे में। बायोडाइवर्सिटी यूनिट 5 का लेसन 15 है, 15वां लेसन है। मैं संजय कुमार पांडे, पीएचडी बायोलॉजी, जवाहर नवोदय विद्यालय बिहिया भोजपुर, आप सबका स्वागत करता हूं। इस वीडियो में हम लोग बात करते हैं लेसन 15 बायोडाइवर्सिटी चैप्टर के बारे में। मेरा प्रयास है कि इस वीडियो को देखने के बाद आपको बुक देखने की ज़रूरत नहीं पड़ेगी और इस वीडियो में ही मैंने जितने सारे संबंधित आपके क्वेरीज हैं उसको सॉल्व करने का प्रयास किया है और मुझे आशा है कि आपको ये वीडियो अच्छा लगेगा। आगे चलते हैं। Biodiversity, which is the world of living forms. Biodiversity refers to biological diversity. The varieties of living forms in a particular area is called biodiversity. The term biodiversity was given by Walter G. Rosen in 1985, but the term biodiversity was mostly popularized by Edward Wilson in 1992. The richness of biodiversity differs from place to place due to environmental conditions and climates and interactions and processes with them. Biodiversity shows heterogeneity. We have to study this chapter under several topics. The topics to be studied under biodiversity are: number 1, magnitude of biodiversity in context of India and world. Number 2, biogeographical regions of India. Number 3, levels of biodiversity, which is also called types of biodiversity. Number 4, patterns of biodiversity. Number 5, importance of biodiversity. Number 6, loss of biodiversity. Number 7, conservation of biodiversity. And number 8, in national and international efforts for conserving biodiversity. Topic 1, magnitude of biodiversity. According to the Iucn 2004, the total number of plants and animal species known so far is slightly more than 1.7 million. The number of species present on the earth ranges from 8 million to 14 million, and more than 70% of all species are animals, and plant account for only 22%. Among animals, insects are the most numerous, about 70%. That we can say that among 10 animals, there are 7 insects. A conservative and scientific estimate given by Robert May places the global diversity at about 7 million. This estimate do not comprise any figure of microorganism, as many of microorganism cannot be cultured in a laboratory. Now you are looking here distribution of species in 3 pie charts: invertebrates, vertebrates and plants. First of all, invertebrates, you are looking here, the major part is of insects, and the second one is another animal groups, third one is mollusk, and the fourth one is crustaceans. The biggest portion of this pie chart is occupied by insects. Approximately 70% of the animal species are insects. And the second pie chart, that is of vertebrates, you are looking here. To remember this pie chart in order, that is from fishes to mammals: fishes, amphibians, reptiles, birds and mammals. Anti-clockwise we have to remember it. Fishes account approximately half of the vertebrate species, and the rest of the species of vertebrates are amphibians, reptiles, birds and mammals. You are looking in the third pie chart, that means the pie chart of the plant. The species of fungi and the species of angiosperms occupy the same same richness, and the another one are algae, lichens, mosses, ferns, bryophytes, and pteridophytes are here. And we know that the biodiversity in India is one of the greatest biodiversities of the world. India has only 2.4% of the world's land area, but it shares about 8.1% of global species diversity. India is one of the 17 mega biodiversities of the world. Here, nearly 45,000 species of plants and twice as many of animals have been recorded from India. As per estimate given by Robert May, more than 1 lakh plant species and more than 3 lakh animal species are to be discovered and described yet. India has 10 biogeographical regions which are rich in species diversity. These biogeographical regions are: number 1, Trans Himalaya; number 2, Himalaya; number 3, Gangetic Plains; number 4, Northeast States; number 5, coastal areas; number 6, islands; number 7, Deccan Peninsula; number 8, Western Ghats; number 9, semi-arid; and number 10, desert. Among these biogeographical regions, Deccan Peninsula is the biggest biogeographical region, and Western Ghats and Northeast states are richer than the other biogeographical regions in context of species richness. Biogeographical regions of India has 100 national parks. There are 500 wildlife sanctuaries in India. There are 18 biosphere reserves in India. There are 39 tiger reserves and many more wetlands in India. And Deccan Peninsula is the largest biogeographical region of India. Western Ghats and Northeast regions are the most biodiversity rich regions. Dear friends, now the third topic, levels of biodiversity. There are 3 interrelated hierarchical levels of biodiversity. Number 1, genetic biodiversity; number 2, species biodiversity; and number 3, ecosystem or community diversity, which is also called ecological diversity. Genetic diversity is the diversification in the context of genes and chromosomal differences. The diversity in the number and the types of genes and chromosomes in different species and variations in the genes and their alleles in the same species known as genetic diversity. Genetic diversity results in the formation of polymorphs, races and subspecies. We know that there are 1,000 varieties of mangoes in India. There are 50,000 genetically different varieties of rice in India, and one medicinal plant, Rolfia vomitoria, that grows in Himalayan ranges has several varieties, and these varieties are based on varying potency and concentration of active chemical reserpine. That means the Rolfia vomitoria produces an active chemical reserpine, and due to varying potency, different level of potency and varying concentration of this chemical, Rolfia vomitoria has different varieties. Now you are looking the picture, genetic diversity of China rose flower. You are looking different kinds of China rose flower here. This China rose is one species, but you are looking different varieties, and a different variety due to genetic changes, due to genetic differences. A difference in the genetic constitution in a species known as genetic diversity, and you are looking an example of China rose flower here. You are also observing the genetic diversity of beetle. Here are two subspecies of beetles, the brown beetles and the red beetles. The brown beetles and the red beetle, here may be one green beetles too, and you are looking, these are genetically different. These are the same species, but these are genetically different. Now species diversity, this is the diversity at species level. A species diversity may be called even with more or less equal number of species. A species with more individuals than other species is known as dominant or uneven. Western Ghats have more amphibian species than Eastern Ghats. Sea and oceans have greater species diversity than river and ponds. Dear friends, now third diversity, that is ecosystem diversity, which is also called ecological diversity. The diversity of different ecosystems in a particular habitat. It may be terrestrial or aquatic. It is the diversity of communities, trophic levels, energy flow, food webs, etc. India has a vast ecological diversity with its desert, rainforest, mangroves, coral reefs, etc. than Norway. We know that India is a subtropical country, and Norway is a polar country. Norway has less number of ecosystem diversity, but India has a wide vast varieties of ecosystems. And ecological diversity is classified into three types. It may be called alpha, beta, and gamma. And about alpha, beta, and gamma ecosystem diversity we have to study in higher classes. Now, patterns of biodiversity. Patterns of biodiversity, that means the parameters of biodiversity richness. There are three patterns of biodiversity richness. These are latitudinal gradient, altitudinal gradient, species area relationship. Latitudinal gradient, that means species diversity decreases as we move away from the equator towards the pole. As we know that an imaginary line that runs parallel to the equator known as latitude. As we move away from the equator, the species richness decreases, and as we move towards the equator, the species richness increases. Increases. Tropical regions, which lies between 23.5 degree north to 23.5 degrees south, have greater diversity richness than temperate and polar regions. Colombia, that is located near the equator, it has 1400 species of birds, but New York, which is located at 41 degree north, that means in temperate region, has only 105 species of birds. Greenland, that is situated near the pole at 71 degree north, has only 56 species of birds, but India, which falls in a tropic region, has 1200 species of birds. Ecuador, that is a country which is situated near the equator, has 10 times more plant species than Midwest of USA. The largest tropical rainforest is Amazonian rainforest, which is also called the lungs of the earth, which is situated in South America. It has 3000 species of fishes, 427 species of amphibians, 427 species of mammals, 378 species of reptiles, 1300 species of birds, 40,000 species of plants, and 1,25,000 species of invertebrates. These species are discovered and described at a number of species of plants and animals from Amazonian rainforest are not described, not discovered yet. And there a question arises, why tropical rainforests are rich in diversity than temperate regions? There are several regions. There may be several regions. One of the reason that tropical latitudes have remained relatively undisturbed for millions of years. Number two, tropical environments are less seasonal, relatively more constant and predictable. Number three reason, availability of more solar energy for higher productivity enhances the richness in biodiversity. And number four, reduced competition due to high resources availability in temperate in tropical regions, and that's why it provides maximum support for species richness. Now, altitudinal gradient, diversity richness changes with the change in altitude. That means in context of height, diversity decreases as we move away from lower altitudes to higher altitude. Decrease in temperature and seasonal variability are major factors for lower diversity in higher altitudes. We know that at each 1,000-meter rise in altitude results in a decrease of 6.5 degrees Celsius temperature. That's why the species richness decreases in a higher altitude. A mountain region has lower diversity richness than plain regions. And species area relationship. A German naturalist and geographer, Alexander von Humboldt, found that within a region, the species richness increases with increasing area, but up to a certain limit. When we explore the species richness in an area, as we increase the area, then we find the more number of species, more more exploration of area, more number of species found, but this is up to a certain limit. The species area relationship gives a rectangular hyperbola that is demonstrated as an equation, that is S equal to Ca to the power Z. When this equation is taken on a logarithmic scale in a graph, it is a straight line which is represented an equation, that means log S equal to log C plus Z log A, where S stands for species richness, A stands for area, C stands for y-intercept, and Z stands for slope of line or regression coefficient. You are looking here the graph of species area richness. The value of Z, that is regression coefficient for frugivorous birds and mammals in a tropical forest of different continent is 1.15. You are looking here the blue line, which is the rectangular parabola, and the red line, which is the straight line, and this is the logarithmic scale of species area relationship. Now the fifth point, importance of biodiversity. Stability of ecosystem, more species, more stable. What is the importance of biodiversity? What is its significance? This is important for stability of ecosystem. When there are more species, there will be more stability of ecosystem. Number 2, biodiversity provides higher productivity of biomass. David Tillman experiment says that less year to year variation in total biomass. When there is less variation, then there will be higher productivity of biomass. Biodiversity are the sources of food and improved varieties of different kinds of plants, and these are sources of fibers and useful products. These are sources of drugs and medicines. Biodiversity provides as a biodiversity acts as a scientific value, as a resource of research. Different kinds of animal or different kinds of plants are meant for scientific research, and these are the part of biodiversity. Biodiversity also helps in ecosystem services, just like pollination, soil checking of soil erosion, checking of floods, control of climate change, etc. And it is also important for ecosystem health. You know about Rivet Popper hypothesis. This hypothesis was proposed by Stanford ecologist Paul Ehrlich in 1981. The relation between species richness and ecosystem function is not linear. The loss of few species will initially create no problem, but beyond a certain point, losses will cause the loss of ecosystem. That means the key species is called as rivet. There is an example of aeroplane. When each passenger coming out of aeroplane keeps takes takes a nut bolt or a rivet of the aeroplane, then there will be no much damage of the aeroplane. But when the rivet or the part of the wings of aeroplane will be given out, there will be the damage of aeroplane. Then the species at it is said that wings are the part of wings are assumed as the ecosystem, and the species at the wings and the part of the wings are assumed as the species in that ecosystem. When some species are removed from those ecosystem, certainly the ecosystem will be disturbed or it will be lost. The lost part of the wings is called rivet, and in context of ecosystem it is called key species. Now, loss of biodiversity. What why uh, what are the reasons of loss of biodiversity? Biodiversity losses cause loss of biodiversity causes the extinction of a species. There are three types of extinction of a species. These are natural or background extinction. These are mass extinction, and number three, anthropogenic extinction. According to the IUCN Red Data Book 2004, documents the extinction of 784 species. Among these, 338 338 vertebrates, 359 invertebrates, and 87 plant species in the last 500 years. Dodo that belongs to Mauritius, quagga that belong to Africa, thylacine from Australia, Steelers sea cow from Russia, subspecies of tiger from Bali, Java, and Caspian have been extinct. There are 15,500 species worldwide that those are facing the threat of extinction. Among them, 12% bird species, 23% mammal species, 32% amphibian species, and 31% gymnosperm species, which are facing threat of extinction. Now, the sixth episode of mass extinction is 100 to 1,000 times faster than any other mass extinction. This is on in a Cenozoic era. The rate of extinction is much greater than the previous rates. Causes of biodiversity losses. There are four major causes of biodiversity losses. These four causes may be called evil quartet. Number one, habitat loss and fragmentation. The area of Amazon rainforest has been reduced from 14% to 6%. Once it was 14% of the total global area, but now it has it has been fragmented into different it has been fragmented, and now it remains at 6%. Number two, over exploitation. Number three, alien species invasion. When an exogenous species is introduced with the indigenous species, this causes the threat of the indigenous species. The introduction of Nile perch into Lake Victoria in East Africa causes the extinction of 2,000 species of cichlid fish. Illegal introduction of African catfish, Clarius garipinus, is posing threat to indigenous catfish, Clarius batrachus, in Indian rivers. Introduction of invasive weeds, Parthenium, Hysterophorus, Lantana camara, and water hyacinth Eichhornia crassipis cause threat to aquatic ecosystem in India. And the number four regions of biodiversity loss, that is co-extinction, Pronuba eucacelis and Yucca. These are in mutual relation. When one species gets evolution is evolved with the help of the another species. When the host species is lost, the guest species also get lost. with mutual relation. These are the four main reasons, main causes of biodiversity loss. Once again, it is habitat loss and fragmentation, over exploitation, number 3 alien species invasion, and number 4 co-extinction. Now, conservation of biodiversity. The protection, uplift, and scientific management of biodiversity for the present as well as future generation is called conservation of biodiversity. There are three reasons for conservation of biodiversity. These are called narrowly utilitarian, direct. It is also called a direct or short-term benefit. Number 2, broadly utilitarian, that is indirect or long-term benefits. And number 3, ethical. There are two ways of conservation strategy: in situ conservation and ex situ conservation. First of all, for reasons of conservation of biodiversity. Narrowly utilitarian, direct economic benefits in the form of food, fibers, drugs, medicine, firewood, industrial products, etc. To find out different, to get direct economic benefits, we have to conserve biodiversity. And for broadly utilitarian, there is a need of biodiversity conservation because this gives us indirect benefit in the form of ecosystem services like pollination, nutrient cycling, check of floods, drought and soil erosion, climate control, etc. And the third one is ethical point of view. Philosophically or spiritually, every species has an intrinsic value and has a right to live, which is called live and let live, जियो और जीने दो. प्रत्येक प्लांट को, प्रत्येक एनिमल को जीने का अधिकार है, प्रत्येक स्पेसीज को जीने का अधिकार है और उसको उसके नेचुरल हैबिटेट में ही फ्लोरिश करने का अधिकार है. तो उन्हें उनके प्रिस्टाइन फॉर्म में देखना ही एथिकली बायोडाइवर्सिटी कंजर्वेशन कहलाता है. नाउ, strategy of biodiversity conservation. There are two main strategy for conservation of biodiversity. Number 1, in situ conservation, and number 2, ex situ conservation. In situ conservation is called the conservation of diversity on spot. Conservation of a species in their natural habitats, that means on spot, is known as in situ conservation. There are two methods of in situ conservation, that is hot spots and protected areas. Hot spots, certain biodiversity regions with very high level of species richness and high degree of endemism, known as hot spots. There are 34 biodiversity hot spots in the world. Western Ghats and Sri Lanka, Indo-Burma and Himalayan are the three hot spots in India. Number 2, that is protected area. Biogeographical regions, biogeographical area where biological diversity along with natural and cultural resources is protected, maintained and managed through legal or other effective measures, known as protective areas. There are four kind of protected areas. These are in the form of national parks, which are about 19 in India. Number 2, wildlife sanctuaries, 448 in India. Number 3, biosphere reserves, 14 in India. And sacred forest or sacred groups, just as Aravalli Hills in Rajasthan, Khasi and Jaintia Hills in Meghalaya, Sarguja, Chanda and Bastar in Chhattisgarh, etc. Ex situ conservation, the conservation of threatened plant and animal species outside their natural habitats in a special setting with special care, is known as ex situ conservation. There are two ways of ex situ conservation. Number 1, off-site collections in the form of botanical gardens, zoological parks, wildlife safari parks, aquarium, etc. And number 2, gene banks, seed banks, tissue culture, cryopreservation of frozen germ plasm and gametes are different types of different strategy of ex situ conservation. And IUCN and Red Data Book. IUCN stands for International Union of Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources. IUCN is now known as World Conservation Union, WCU. IUCN has established 5 main categories of threatened species of their conservation. In 1963, in 1994, and in 1988, it categorized into 5 groups about the threatened species for their conservation. These are extinct, endangered, vulnerable, rare, and insufficiently known species. Now, these now IUCN has recognized 9 red list categories of species. These are extinct species, extinct in wild species, critically endangered species, vulnerable species, near threatened species, least concern species, data deficient species, and not evaluated species. National and international efforts for conservation of biodiversity. Dear friends, international efforts have been made for the conservation of biodiversity worldwide. Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species (CITES) came into force in 1975. IUCN, now known as World Conservation Union WCU, United Nations Conference on Environment and Development UNCED, now known as Earth Summit at Rio de Janeiro 1992, World Summit at Johannesburg, South Africa 2002, Earth Summit Rio Plus 20 at Rio de Janeiro 2012, Greenpeace and Worldwide Fund for Nature. These are NGO, non-profit organization. Man and Biosphere Program, MAB, under UNESCO. These are the activity, or these are the programs which are being initiated by global agencies. And in India, there are several procedures, there are several machineries which help in conservation of biodiversity. These are Indian Board of Wildlife, IBWL, constituted in 1952, Bombay Natural History Society, founded in 1883, Wildlife Preservation Society of India, Dehradun, founded in 1958, Joint Forest Management, running under Ministry of Environment and Forest, National Bureau of Plant, Animal and Fish Genetic Resources have been made, Wildlife Protection Acts and national environment policies have been made, establishment of national parks, wildlife sanctuaries and biosphere reserves, zoological gardens are under process, are made, and these are being nurtured. These are being nurtured under Ministry of Environment and Forest. Some important national parks in India: Jim Corbett National Parks, which is situated in Uttarakhand. This is the first national park of India. Kaziranga National Park in Assam, Hazaribagh National Park in Jharkhand, Gir National Park in Gujarat, Kanha National Park in Madhya Pradesh, Bandipur National Park in Karnataka, Sundarban National Park in West Bengal, and some important wildlife sanctuaries in India: Kevaladev Bird Sanctuaries in Bharatpur, Rajasthan, Annamalai Sanctuaries, Coimbatore, Tamil Nadu, Dachigram Sanctuaries, Srinagar, Jammu and Kashmir, Nagarjun Sagar Wildlife Sanctuaries in Andhra Pradesh, Chilka Lake Bird Sanctuaries in Odisha, Periyar Sanctuaries in Kerala, Shikri Devi Sanctuaries in Mandi, Himachal Pradesh, Jallapara Sanctuary in West Bengal, Manas Wildlife Sanctuary in Assam, and Sultanpur Lake Bird Sanctuary, Gurgaon, Haryana. Now you can check your vitals, you can check your progress here. There are different questions taken from the entire chapter, and from these questions you can check your progress here. First question: the term biodiversity was coined by The second one, the Rivet Popper hypothesis was given by. Third one, Respine is obtained from. Fourth, the relationship between species richness and area is represented by the equation. Here you have to write the equation of a species area richness relationship. The relation between area and species richness was given by. Dodo was native of this country. The four regions of biodiversity loss is collectively called. The introduction of which species became the threat for extinction of cichlid fish. Steelers sea cow was native species of this country. Khasi and Jaintia hills are located in these states. Gametes of threatened species can be preserved in viable and fertile conditions for long period by this technique. The Earth Summit in 1992 was held in this city, where was the World Summit on Sustainable Development held in 2002. The invasive weed known as terror of Bengal is. Which forest is called the lungs of the earth? The word Iucn stands for. Quagga is extinct species of this country. Introduction of which species became threat for indigenous catfishes in India. Thylacine is extinct species of this country. How many mega biodiversity are there around the world? And in a last, thank you very much for viewing this video. I hope this video will help you in entire aspects of your need. Thank you very much.